Does this jar of clay explain our weakness, sickness, and struggles, or something else? It is from 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7.
Yeah, so jars of clay is a beautiful thing if you look at it in the context. Again, I think we did this verse. Uh, the fact that we realize that we are jars of clay tells us uh, that we are very lowly people. Okay, there is no scope or room for pride or hubris or conceit, and we are earthy people, we are lowly people, and in and of ourselves we are just jars of clay, empty. But what makes us jars that are worthy is the content that is there in us, is the God that is there in us, is the gospel that is there in us, is the calling that is there in us. So Paul says, it's very important for us as Christian ministers who want to do authentic ministry and be authentic ministers, to constantly be aware and have the right perspective as to who we are. He's not saying that we should always think of ourselves as worthless and useless and all of that. That's why I said in many places Paul calls himself a servant, in other places he calls himself as a slave, and here interestingly he calls himself a jar of clay, and he calls himself also as an ambassador. Now all of these terms are terms that can be applied to Christians and Christian ministers. And we need to hold these terms in tension. At different points in time, we are different to different people. And if we only focus on the idea of we're jars of clay, we're jars of clay, we're jars of clay, we might not have or not appropriate the authority that we have as ambassadors of Christ when we are required to, when we represent Christ and when we share the gospel with this world. But when we are all the time thinking of ourselves only as ambassadors, there is a certain amount of pride and hubris that can set into our hearts. And so it's important for us to have a multifaceted, comprehensive view of who a Christian is and a Christian minister or a Christian disciple is, so that we would take from what is appropriate for that particular moment and function and time, and would be able to, in holistic ways, maximally be the kind of Christian disciple or Christian minister that God has called and ordained us to be. Okay, so jars of clay speaks about humility, speaks about emptiness, speaks about vulnerability, speaks about, you can apply it to different angles of health and weakness in the body and whatnot. Okay, basically to show that we are earthy and that we are limited and that we are, quote unquote, not of any value or worth unless we are filled with God or Christ and his work. I hope that helps.